Going around Europe, it is clear that cohesion policy will continue to provide tailored solutions adapted to local needs, ensuring responses that address specific regional strengths and requirements. This is one of the most valuable attributes of the cohesion policy. For example, in my visit to Greece, I met with mayors of islands. When I visited Finland, I traveled to Lapparanta, meeting with representatives on eastern border regions. These are two very different territories that have specific challenges and need different actions. The current cohesion policy programs were discussed between Member States from 2019 to 2021 and signed the partnership agreement in 2022. And the implementation is starting now. Since then, the world has changed significantly. Member States, regions and territories now face new and intensified challenges. Traditional challenges such as housing and water management have increased, and the new challenges including competitiveness, defence, security and resilience have emerged. Now, and in order to respond to the changes around us, the Commission has taken an important step forward, relaunching cohesion policy. On Tuesday, the College of the Commission has taken an important step forward by adopting the Midterm review package. The College approved both a communication and legislative proposal. The communications reaffirms the principle of cohesion policy, which we all respect. It highlights the scope of our work, the action we are taking, as well as the roadmap for the future. And it identifies key areas that, from my meetings with you, I know are important to the Committee of the Regions, like the Agenda for the Cities, Islands and Rural Areas. The legislative proposal introduced targeted change to the European Regional Development Fund, the Cohesion Fund and the Just Transition Fund regulations, introducing incentives and flexibilities for 5 new priorities, while also accelerating implementation through simplification. These changes offer increased possibilities to Member States and the regions to direct funding to the new emerging priorities now. Timing is a crucial point. Member States and the regions that want to use this opportunity must submit their programme amendments within 2 months of the entry into force of the revised legislation. The Commission will assess and engage with authorities to adopt the revised programmes within 2 months of submission. The reprogramming process is expected to be completed by the end of 2025, allowing for update programme implementation from 2026 onwards. As I said, we highlighted in our proposal 5 priorities. The first is competitiveness. We offer the possibility for increased investment in strategic technologies. The second is defence. We propose that Member States and the regions can use Cohesion Fund to support certain defence actions. For example, this can include support to companies in the defence sector or critical infrastructure protection. Specific incentives are also provided to eastern border regions, which face the dual challenge of increasing security and relaunching their economies. Third is affordable housing. I know how important this issue is for our citizens. We aim to tackle the housing investment gap and the double cohesion policy funding for affordable housing as per the President's political guidelines. In all my meetings with mayors and ministers, housing is a priority and it is important to push in this direction. 75% of European citizens live in cities, creating a problem of overpopulation, while rural areas suffer the opposite challenge, the depopulation. Fourth is water resilience. We have seen regions facing water scarcity while others are affected by floods. We propose change to encourage investment in water resilience, including digitalization of water infrastructure and the mitigation of drought and desertification impacts. Fifth, energy transition. The proposal supports increased focus on the energy transition, in particular for energy interconnection and recharging infrastructure. To achieve these goals, we will provide incentives and remove barriers that prevent efficient and timely fund utilization. First, increased pre-financing and co-financing. Investments in each of the 5 strategic priorities highlighted before will benefit from 30% pre-financing rates. Investment in these priority areas will also eligible for an EU co-financing rate of up to 100%. Cohesion programs that allocate at least 15% of their funds to the 5 strategic priorities will benefit from pre-financing of 5%. For eastern border regions, this pre-financing will be 10%, with an EU co-financing rate of up to 100%. Second, more flexibility in allocating and implementing EU cohesion funds. In all my meetings with stakeholders, there is a wide call for more simplification and flexibility. We are already taking first step in this direction with this proposal. We are, for example, simplifying the use of the Just Transition Fund, and to ensure that implementing authorities have time to amend their programs and complete the new investments. We are proposing to extend the date for eligibility by 1 year to 2030, only for those programs which allocate at least 15% of their funds to the 5 strategic priorities. In the end, I want to clarify an important point. With this regulation, we are not moving money to one sector to another. We are not forcing member states and regions to spend in specific areas. This is a voluntary choice of the member states and the region. The Commission is giving member states and the regions the opportunity of the midterm review to adapt their current programs, to invest in priority areas according to the needs of their territories. That is what we are doing. This is important to avoid any misunderstanding. It is on voluntary basis and up to member states and the regions to decide if they want to take this opportunity, if they want to reprogram, and in case they want to do so, in which areas to invest the resources. The Commission is not giving the money of cohesion away. The resources of cohesion remain at the disposal of member states and the regions. I'm also focused on what comes next. The proposal presented here today will create the right condition for when the discussion on the next MFF will properly start. The midterm review is the first step in modernizing and strengthening cohesion policy, to reinforce competitiveness, to boost resilience, and to build Europe's capacity to respond to future challenges. It will allow us to speed up the implementation of these programs, simplify processes, and increase the impact of cohesion policy. At the same time, we have an opportunity, a golden opportunity, to build on this foundation for the future. Honourable members, my commitment is to design and implement the policy in close partnership with the national, regional and local authorities, because regions shall remain at the centre and involved in this process. To shape this future effectively, we must work together and build one single voice, The Committee of Regions will remain a crucial partner in this journey. Your perspective guarantees our policies are aligned with the real needs of our communities. I look forward to continuing our work together, dear Kata. Together we can ensure that cohesion policy remains a powerful driver of competitiveness, resilience and development for all regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We know you came from Strasbourg to be with us, clarify, listen and understand, and thank you very much for that. We respect that. I have a lot of requests from the floor. You need to respect time, because if you don't, it will take away time from somebody else, okay? So the floor first goes to political groups. Nikolaos Tsardalias from Attica, Governor of Attica.
Distinguished President of the European Commission, politics of cohesion is the angular stone of the European structure. We know that this is the echo of the principles of value and equitable development that heralds steps towards the European integration. It is with much care and some relief that we heard the Vice President of the European Commission saying what he said, and we did study the proposal for the midterm review of the cohesion policy. Our political party salutes this timely acknowledgement of the Commission of the need for flexibility and political cohesion, so that we may all face efficiently the new challenges vis-à-vis the new context. The proposal for the reinforcement of security, competitiveness, the decarbonization and defense, as well as to deal with issues such as affordable housing, energy transition, and the rest definitely go to the right direction. But there are some challenges that as yet are not held are taken into care. We should be very careful. We know that Europe is a mosaic of regions, so each of these needs and priorities need to be taken into account, and greatly we need to have those resources equitably distributed. In major big regions and cities, we need infrastructure interventions to upgrade infrastructures and be able to face climate change, support the effort towards climate resilience. We need to find more resources, amongst which by stopping to exclude the access to own resources, so that the European budget be in a position to increase, or perhaps by redistribution for non-allocated funds under the cohesion mechanism. We need a long-term, ambitious policy that should not be an easy tool vis-à-vis new European problems. In closing, may we underscore the fact that the EU should place more trust in the regional and local authorities, the national managing authorities, so that the adoption of European priorities be able to incorporate into the local realities in the light of the consequences and in realism.
Thank you, Madam President. I will continue in Slovene.
Dear Commissioner Fitto, dear colleagues, we are faced with turbulent times, with new challenges, with demand from us to make certain sacrifices, new support for the competitiveness of the EU, with the focus on safety. The new housing policy is moving in a correct direction for Europe. EPP and our colleagues are supporting the redistribution of the cohesion funds with the cooperation with the local and regional level, but we have to ensure that this flexibility is used in a correct way. We have to make sure that the cohesion policy is not seen as a quick solution for the coming problems. Cohesion policy is designed in a long term. It requires a careful analysis, because it should be given to suitable project. Commissioner Fitto, we will have to find new resources, and we will have to look into the reprogramming of cohesion funds. We have to conclude the reprogramming in a careful way. We have to remove bureaucracy. We have to focus on the management of funds, and we have to otherwise the progress will slow down. It is key that we take into account all regions, but we don't forget about the less developed regions. We have to focus on the projects in many regions. Otherwise, the essence of the cohesion politics will be left behind. We have to empower local and regional regions. EPP group believes that we have to make decisions on the local level, not from the top down approach. We need that, and we have to look how we will implement effective solutions. Subsidiarity is very important here, and we have to make sure that this is the core of the reform. The simplifications, which are key, mustn't be a reason for the new decentralization. If we want to face the new challenges, we have to remain loyal to the values of the cohesion policy. We have to act carefully. We have to trust our local governments so that they will find solutions which reflect their regions. Thank you.
Well, the floor goes to Matthias Wunderling.
Sehr geehrter
Dear Vice President Fitto, dear Mrs. President, dear colleagues, we all know that the status quo is not an option. Europe is facing many challenges, but at the same time, the budgets in the European House and the budgets in the regions are under extreme pressure. The suggested changes for GF partly address these challenges, but we must not fail to see the long-term aim of cohesion policy, and so in terms of higher co-financing and pricing, these must not be used to give the wrong incentive, which would undermine the structural direction of cohesion policy. Just state pay funds will not be able to achieve our joint aims. If EFS Plus is not being considered here, this must not be repeated. Social political issues are an important aspect of the EU. In our discussions, we must not lose sight of long-term planning for a future cohesion policy. We must optimize. It is positive, basically, when the Commission sees the requirement and to react to new political changes during the current financing period. However, regional means are already mostly tied down and earmarked. Reprogramming would require a huge administrative burden. What we need is security so we can plan. For me, the main points, important points are we need a return to M+3 for 2027. So the actual financing period started late. It's not a sign that it is not working. The EU rules were voted late, and in parallel of cohesion policy and building resilience facility that delayed things. So reprogramming requirements now would put undue pressure on the timelines. Of course, in future, we will need to produce national plans as a basis for cohesion policy, which links these aspects, but we need basic pillars. We need to establish basic pillars, and one important point is that the regions have to continue to be allowed to play an elevated active role. They have to have the responsibility for programming and implementation of the structural funds. The funds belong in the hands of the regions. Secondly, voting on aims and that has to be anchored within the regions, and you, Mr. Vice President, pointed that out. One important point to conclude, competitiveness is important to us, but we must not make the mistake to use competitiveness for issues like climate, social Europe and rural areas to be neglected. Let us not lose sight of this for a strong cohesion policy, strong region and a strong Europe. Thank you.
Ellen van Zellen.
Thank you. Dear Chair, dear Vice President Fitto, colleagues, let me begin by thanking the Commission for its clarity in setting out the new priorities for cohesion policy. As a local representative from one of Europe's more developed regions, I particularly welcome the renewed focus on competitiveness and the drive to close the innovation gap. The emphasis on economic resilience and flexibility is not only timely, it's necessary. As we recently discussed during our lunch in Rotterdam, I would like to emphasize an important nuance. Supporting excellence, breakthrough innovation and globally competitive sectors is absolutely vital. But we must do this with care, ensuring our investments also strengthen the regional value chains and the small and medium-sized enterprises that underpin them. Even when SMEs are not the direct recipients of funding, they must not become collateral in a policy shift to focus too narrowly on large-scale strategic investments. Europe's competitiveness doesn't exist in isolation. It is built locally, in our communities, through networks of companies, clusters, skilled workers and strong institutions. Cohesion policy must continue to weave these local threads into our shared European fabric. Partnership is paramount in this context, as only with local anchoring we can make a meaningful impact. On defence and security, let me be clear. This is a reality we must face, whether we welcome it or not. Regions are uniquely placed to contribute, be it through investing in resilience and preparedness or scaling up industrial capacities where needed. But we must ensure that this new focus enhances territorial cohesion rather than deepening disparities. Commissioner, the overall flexibility proposed is a step in the right direction, and I commend the Commission's openness to dialogue. In my experience, Europeans must feel the direct impact of Europe, particularly through visible initiatives like the European Social Funds Plus, which directly benefit our inhabitants. But I would like to ask, in this push to modernise cohesion, how will the Commission ensure that we do not leave behind the least developed regions and the traditional objectives of cohesion policy? These goals, reducing disparities, promoting convergence and fostering solidarity, must remain the beating heart of this policy. Let's be ambitious, yes, but not at the cost of our foundations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Władysław Ortil.
Pani Przewodnicząca, Panie Przewodniczący.
Dear President, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, on behalf of my group, I would like to thank the Commissioner Fitto for the subsequent presence in this committee when prioritizing we need pragmatic approach. One of the key postulates of our group was to adapt the cohesion policy to the new challenges EU is facing. That is why, with great satisfaction, I'd like to welcome the proposal of the Commission allowing the states and the regions to spend additional resources according to the needs for strategic priorities. We especially appreciate the increase of finances for the increase of competitiveness and defense, especially since our defense needs fast strengthening, especially in the regions that are most prone to conflicts, like the eastern regions. I represent such a region. Podkarpacie is the region bordering with Ukraine. I was about strengthening the support between the security policy and dual-use technologies and the defense industry. The dual-use technologies and the investment in the defense industry can increase our resilience in regions and their development. The competitiveness defense industry is of great importance here. And of course, it is also so that the cohesion policy has to become more simplified, less bureaucratic, and the Commission rightfully wants to accelerate these simplifications and the increase of flexibility. That is why we are really happy about the increase of the financing by 30% and the financing of 100%. This will allow regions to redirect the resources to the strategic priorities fast without engaging the resources of their own budgets. At the same time, broadening the support for big enterprises will be of key importance to our competitiveness. The big companies are leaders in developing new technology, especially in the automotive sector, the defense sector, for which the support will be of great importance facing the now crisis, the European automotive crisis is facing now. So, dear President, thank you for the partnership with the Committee of Regions, and these are the real effects now, not just talks.
Caroline Duane. Dear Vice President Fitto and Madam President, dear colleagues, the European Alliance Group welcomes this mid-term review. It is both necessary and timely. The world around us is changing fast, geopolitically, economically and socially, and the policy must adapt to these changes. However, while adjusting to the new realities, we should be careful not to drift too far from the core purpose of cohesion policy. It was designed to promote social and territorial cohesion, to reduce disparities between regions and ensure that nobody is left behind. The goal remains as relevant as ever. There should be no centralisation, but keep the regional hold on planning, management and implementation of cohesion policy. On housing, we welcome the stronger focus. In many of our regions, we face an acute lack of affordable housing. If the Commission wants to double the funding, we are ready to act. But rules must be clear, permitting, simplified and access straightforward for local authorities. A focus on energy is hugely important for an island nation. We have so much potential. This renewed focus is very welcome. One may think that coming from a member state in which it rains 300 days a year, the focus on water is a priority for our group. Some regions have huge shortages or even droughts, and others facing flooding. But I welcome an investment of cohesion in water resilience. Everyone has a right to clean, safe water. Cohesion policy over the past few years seems to be the fund to go to whenever there is a crisis, and this is unfortunate. There is a very clear role of cohesion policy. Finally, our Group President, Nanette Marpatis from Corsia, would like to thank you for the renewed focus on island policy in the review, and we hope that this can be implemented in the short term. So in conclusion, let's modernise cohesion, but let's also not lose sight of its foundations, otherwise it may lose its impact where it's needed most. Thank you. Thank you. Erika von Kalben.
Frau Präsident.
Mrs. President, ladies and gentlemen, I will speak in German. First of all, I would like to thank you, Commissioner Fitto, also for seeking the dialogue with the regions, also here within the ADR. We very much welcome this. But this dialogue does not mean, certainly, that we don't take a critical view of what is being proposed. And we find that cohesion policy, which has to be discussed, not just talking about it as the local level. It is our policy, the policy of a local level, which brings Europe closer to its citizens, and that is the core. It is the foundation of European policy, and that's given with all the new challenges which we see, of course, which have to be addressed, and all your priorities are correct and important. But however, this means that these things have to be implemented at the local level. And so the local development strategies which are being furthered by cohesion policy is not a nice to have that you have alongside. It is the basis of us creating houses and flats, of providing water, and us facing the very large geopolitical challenges. And so we would entreat you really not just to keep an eye on the regions, but to ensure that decisions are made at a local level, that these decisions are not centralized at a national level, because it is the regional level where development strategies take part. It's the regional level where citizens are being taken on board, and they are the ones which we have to keep with us in Europe, and that is done through cohesion policy. Thank you very much.
Dear Madam President, dear Vice President Fitto, thank you so much for this debate. It's really important and we really appreciate it. The Commission's new priorities to support European Union's competitiveness, decarbonisation, defence, digitalisation, affordable housing and the energy transition are a crucial step. We totally agree on this. However, we must also ensure the flexibility to this shift. Cohesion funds should be used wisely also in the future. We know that when the local and regional level is together, then the impact is the strongest. So we really appreciate your point of view in this idea. Cohesion policy in its nature is a long-term investment policy, and that's how it should be. We definitely need this long-term idea. And then in the end, we must ensure that the poorer regions do not bear the brunt of these changes so that no one stays behind. So let us continue with this discussion, and thank you so much for the debate. Thank you.
Kiitos. Anders Ekström.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here again today. Many good things have already been said about the important role of regions in the EU cohesion policy, but I want to underline a specific aspect related to the regions with legislative powers. Multi-level governance is at the heart of our democracy, and it's essential that EU policy respects this. In fact, even Article 4.2 in the treaty clearly states that the Union shall respect national and constitutional structures, including regional self-government. With this in mind, I would like to point out that it's essential that the future cohesion policy allows for more than one plan per member state. A strict cohesion policy may conflict with that, especially if it means centralising decision-making to the national level. This could lead to transfer of powers from regions to capitals, further away from people. Commissioner, this cannot be an option. The regions need to be able to trust the cohesion policy to respect local self-government. We are ready to develop Europe. We trust both large and small regions can unite in making Europe stronger. Thank you.
Kiitos. Brigitte Pallauf.
Herr Kommissar.
Dear Commissioner, Mrs. President, thank you very much for this dialogue. Thank you for that you keep coming back to us to seek this dialogue. What is cohesion policy? It has to be long-term. It has to be accessible to all governments. It has to see the new challenges of transformation and rise to these challenges. It must not be centralized. It is not a crisis element. And that is why the regions are important. And your communication, I was pleased on the one hand. I was worried on the other hand when I read the statement. I see a tendency to strengthen larger companies, larger cities. I come from a region with small and medium-sized companies, small structures. What we need, especially in this area, is the possibility to have a resilient, good life in the countryside as well. So please take this into account. Not to have more intensive national plans, but to open new possibilities, and especially the right for people to remain has been mentioned. Let us implement it.
Matteo Lepore.
Thank you, Madam President, and greetings to Commissioner Fitto. I'd like to thank him for this midterm review and the proposals that it contains. And as was said in his intervention, there's the importance of the regions and the cities, which is enshrined here, and the principles of cohesion, reducing inequalities and disparities. This is all seen here, but there is a contradiction regarding the principle that states can use flexibility in defending themselves. Now, I believe that this is in contradiction with the principles that you have presented. And then, as we hear that housing and water are incredibly important to strengthen our regions and our cities, and we've heard from many mayors who have presented proposals on these areas, and I hope that these issues and these topics can be used for the next generation EU funds, which are not used by states. Thank you.
Francisca Ramis.
Buenos días, vicepresidente.
Good morning, Vice President Fitto, and thank you for this discussion, which is so interesting and so fruitful. In my region, in the Balearic Islands, like in other regions, the cohesion funds have allowed for large investments. In the current debate on the future of the cohesion policy post-2027, we defend a management and governance model which is at several different levels, a multi-level model which allows for decentralization, which is also flexible and simplified. The regions in this must be able to take part in decision-making on the future of funds. It should not just be an implementing role. Nobody knows better, as other colleagues have said, the needs of citizens. Nobody knows these better than the local bodies or the regional administrative bodies. Therefore, I'd like to stress that despite the fact that some island areas have not been considered outermost regions, these regions nevertheless do face a great lack of funding and for the entrance and departure of passengers and also goods and trade. And therefore the future cohesion policy should pay specific attention to island communities so as to overcome these problems and to adapt our programs to these real needs which our regions suffer, above all the island regions. Thank you very much, Mr. Fitto.
Mark Speich.
Dear Vice President Fitto, you mentioned in your introductory remarks that being on the ground is crucial, and I think we all couldn't agree more. So this is to renew our offer to use the implementation experience represented by this body in working on simplifying and cutting red tape. But I would also like to address your attention to one central term in the communication of the Commission, and that is performance-based. Who would object to a performance-based approach? Well, on this abstract level, none. But if it means linking the reimbursement of regional funds to centrally defined goals, goals defined without the participation of the region, then performance-based means moving away from a place-based approach. And it implies new complexity. And I think now is the time for simplification, for easing the access, especially for small and medium-sized companies. And we are here to help. So use the experience in this room. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Tanja Christova.
Thank you, President. Dear Vice President for Cohesion and Reforms, Fitto, thank you for being with us at this very crucial moment when the cohesion policy is in the process of modernization. I would like to emphasize that the cohesion policy is not just a funding mechanism, it is the European Union's deepest promise for solidarity, fairness, and, of course, many times repeated so far, long-term investments in people and places. Therefore, we must be very careful in the process of reshaping it and guarantee that it will not lose what makes it work and successful. And we know that Europe urgently needs resources. Why then turn first to the unused funds from the Resilience and Recovery Facility, centralized and regional authorities? At least this is the case of my country. As a member of the Committee of the Region, I believe that we all are ready to contribute to Europe's strategic priorities, but it should not be at the expense of our communities. And therefore, we must guard decentralization, flexibility, and the inclusiveness of cohesion policy. Thank you.
Благодаря. Peter Kaiser.
Cohesion policy is the basis for a policy between regions and communities and wants to redress imbalances. It wants to focus on lived international solidarity. I think with financial centralisation, which goes hand in hand with this reform, the danger is massive that regions, cities and communes will be left behind. So I would like to plead that co-determination and responsibility of the regions needs to be assured so that a special focus goes on the midterm review. We need possibilities to correct, to intervene, and to perhaps take a different direction. So in this context, I would like to share a thought. We should think about, with the Maastricht criteria, the investment in these 5 principles that you mentioned, Mr. Vice President, are always damaging. So a critical check on this is essential.
Kiitos, presidentti. Ensinnäkin haluan antaa
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for your approach to cohesion policy from the point of view of the regions. Only by seeing and experiencing regionally, dear Commissioner, you will be up to date and up to speed on cohesion policy. So I want to thank you for that. Cohesion policy must solve local problems. How security of supply, energy transition, green transition can be addressed locally. But one new element for cohesion policy is now the defense policy, which is a bit confusing for us. How much does it take from cohesion funding? I would like you to specify that, but in my home city of Oulu, for example, cohesion policy and defense policy, for those technologies in the very core, so in that sense, we can give opportunities for Europe.
Dear Vice President Fitto, dear colleagues, first of all, let me thank you, Mr. Fitto, for being with us for the second time. It shows your commitment to the cities and regions of Europe, as well as your speech last week in Gorizia, Nova Gorica, at the conference that I had the pleasure to meet you and participate. On behalf of the ECR Group, we welcome the proposal to make cohesion policy more flexible and targeted to our priorities. There is an urgent need to make our regions more competitive and resilient, so we commend the Commission for enabling on a voluntary basis to the Member States and regions to reinforce the key areas which are key for them. As the President of Bratislava region, I am particularly pleased with the Commission's recognition of the challenges of cities, including housing affordability, but also the key role in delivering EU policy goals. Cities and metropolitan regions will play an instrumental role in enhancing the ability of our continent and our EU to compete. Thank you.
Loredana Capone, the Puglia.
Gentile Presidente.
Dear President and dear Vice President Fitto, first of all I would like to thank you for being here with us and for working with us. I have some concern concerning the new cohesion policy. Until now, this cohesion policy has ensured great opportunities to the poorest and weakest regions. These opportunities have sometimes been unique and has enabled them to overcome their social and structural difficulties. We mustn't lose faith in the regions and the municipalities, because this is tantamount to self-determination. It means understanding our own needs that are expressed through adequate governance. If we centralise decisions, this trust is lost. So your report with us would dwindle. This is why we need to ensure collaboration, but we don't really take decisions that should be taken by the regions and the municipalities. And then when it comes to financing the priorities, this new system of funding risks penalising the poorest regions, and we mustn't allow this.
Dear Commissioner, These priorities are real and must be funded. But cohesion policy cannot always be the deposit of money for new priorities. Cohesion policy is a predictable and long-term investment policy of our Europe. Europe must not choose between defense and cohesion, between drones and teachers, between missiles and hospitals. We must do both. We need more resources. How? We need a new political vision. We must build on a union of savings and investments. Enrico Letta reminds us, over 300 billion euros every single year leave Europe and go to fund the United States financial market. This must stop. Those savings must build the Europe we believe in, not just Wall Street portfolios. Imagine if those billions stayed home. We can finance everything. Let us not choose between protection and prosperity. Let us choose both. Thank you.
Mulțumesc. Isabelle Boudinot.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur le Commissaire Fitto.
Thank you very much, Vice President Fitto. Concerning the midterm review, we understand that the situation is very complex and tense, but we believe that there's fundamental incomprehension of the method and the drafting of the cohesion policy implementation by the Management Committee. This has been the result of a rigorous and patient work by the various local partners in order to find efficient solutions. Reprogramming funds, and here in record times if we were to make an intelligent job, is counterproductive. It is therefore unacceptable to mix together these forms of payment. The cohesion policy is in fact a long-term policy that requires a structured approach and cannot be a tool that is constantly changed to tackle emergencies. Thank you.
Grazie Presidente.
Thank you, President. And I'd like to extend my greetings to Vice President Fitto, as well as thanking him for his presence here today and the attention that he's posing to the Committee of the Regions. I would like to ask him two questions. The first is that I would like to delve into this question. How can we avoid Cohesion Fund to become a strategy to tackle emergencies, such as the defence? And there's another point that I would like to underline. That is true. We're giving countries, member states, more opportunities. But how do they intend to address these issues? As colleague Capone said earlier on, every single region has already put in place a number of projects. But if we believe that we can change them at will, then we risk making steps backwards. So it's very good to open up opportunities, but we must focus on one undeterring idea. And we saw this when Commissioner Fitto was a minister in our country, centralising funds, the NRPP funds, and we should avoid this happening here. This would be taking a step backwards.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta, queridos colegas.
Thank you very much, President, and colleagues of the Committee of the Regions, and esteemed Vice President Fitto. This is the second time that I am given the opportunity to talk with you. This was happened a while back with the European Parliament, and right now we are reaching an agreement on the cohesion policy and the very important role that the regions must play. Today, undoubtedly, political priorities have changed with the changing political scenario, but our obligation is to focus on midterm and long-term solutions within the multi-annual financial framework. Mr. Vice President, with all due respect, I believe that we must be very strict with the members of the Commission so that they don't they respect our wishes and that the funds are used for the purposes intended. Otherwise, we risk falling into populism and extremisms, and they risk turning into an external manifestation of our failings. It is therefore important that we don't disappoint these expectations. At the regions, we wish to simplify, improve, we want to be more efficient, but I need to reiterate that what works needs to be maintained. Thank you.
Majerski. Mr. Majerski? Milan? No. Christophe Rion.
Merci, Présidente.
Thank you, President. In February 2022, Putin declared war on Ukraine. Yesterday, Trump declared a war of tariffs on Europe. In order to avoid chaos and react intelligently, we must defend the cohesion policy, its foundations and the values of the European Union. You have come to Paris to listen to us, and this is the position of the mayors of France, which you heard, and we are obviously in favour of simplification. We're in favour of a plan to relaunch housing and promote entrepreneurial innovation, particularly in terms of defence. But we say no to a reduction of the budget for the Cohesion Fund on over 300 billion euros. And we also say no to the transfer of and the distribution of the powers of these politics based on Article 8 of Protocol 2 that makes of the Committee of the Regions the safeguarding body of the principle of subsidiarity. You can certainly count on our determination to defend staunchly this cohesion policy, and we count on your action and your strength to win with the member states. Thank you.
Gracias, Presidenta. Querido Vicepresidente.
Thank you, President. Dear Vice President Fitto, we are aware of the fact that the priorities of the European Union have changed in a context that is in turmoil, but this mustn't push us to radically change a policy that functions, that works well, and that is giving us good results. The objective mustn't mean undermining the cohesion policy and to use it for other ends. In this sense, this mission could serve us in implementing the cohesion policy based on priorities and needs. So therefore, we must listen directly and particularly to the regions. Defence, water supply, energy supply and decarbonisation, all part of this. Essentially, it is a question of reboosting competitiveness in the European Union. And to this end, we believe it is essential to deepen a simplification agenda and to reduce the regulatory burden so that we can reduce and improve, rather, the impact of our cohesion policy.
Dank u, president. Geachte commissaris Fitto.
Thank you very much for your proposal for a modernized cohesion policy. This actually gives chances, but for the Netherlands, it's difficult because actually to spend only that % of the cohesion policy for this, it's a small budget, but a good defense for the Netherlands is very important, and especially transition is important to have 100% of financing. In Rotterdam, we actually had agreed to have simplification of the execution of the policy, and I will make an appointment with you for that. I am concerned that indeed a part of the funds will be put under European management. This can only be done from regional authorities. To conclude, in the midterm review, you say that in the next multi-financial framework, these ratios will come back in that framework. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, on behalf of the Polish delegation in the Committee of Regions, firstly I would like to thank you for a very promising start of your mission, including your willingness to cooperate with the COR on an ongoing basis. As a Poles, we fully support the strengthening of our citizens' security, resilience and competitiveness, which are reflected in the presented new priorities of the cohesion. What particularly draws our attention is the question of how you, Mr. Commissioner, assess the chances of ensuring complementarity between various funds. In addition to the European Regional Development Fund and Just Transition Fund, also European Social Fund Plus. For example, we see lack of possibility to co-finance through the ESF, improvement of competences in the civil protection. Only true synergies can be the true answer for our challenges. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję. Antonio Aurigemma.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Vice President Fitto. I have read your text and listened to your speech very carefully, and I am ever more convinced that, particularly in these times, very particular moments where we saw that President Trump announced new tariffs, we see that there are conflicts that affect parts of our planet. Cohesion policies play an ever more important role than they used to. This is why it is important that we look at recent changes in order to focus on our objectives to guarantee energy transition, social housing, industrial competitiveness, tackle the water crisis. We must invest ever more in strategies and investments that will reduce the territorial and social disparities in the various European regions. This is why I believe that the Committee of the Regions and the EU, as well as regional commissioners who have been elected democratically, play an ever more important role, even within their nations.
I close the debate.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Vice President Fitto. First of all, we need to confirm the resources on the cohesion. I appreciate the words chosen by the Vice President. We're not allocating new funds. We're using the same funds. The second word is the willingness to adhere to this proposal. We must be responsible. We're called to use responsibility, and this is another key word, another consideration. The Commission, of course, establishes a panoply of possibilities, and I believe that this is positive because we're talking about security, all-round security. We have funds for competitiveness. It's a security of defence because the world teaches us that we need to defend ourselves. Then security means housing. It means ensuring that people have a house. And then we also need water and soil security, which is crucial to our regions. Thank you, President.
I close the debate now, and I will give back the floor to Raffaele Fitto for some reactions. You hear the fears? You see the patterns? So please, bring some positive optimism in the room.
Thank you, dear Kata. Thank you for your inputs and contributions to this important discussion. For me, it is fundamental to listen to your voices. And you are the protagonist of the cohesion policy, and we have to work together to improve it. I want to mention some point that you said. For example, on the RRF, we have included in the communication the possibility of a future amendment that some RRF projects could be considered to be funded by the cohesion. Another point is that I'm engaging to defend the cohesion. That's why in the communication on the MFF there is a clear reference of the role of the region in the design and implementation of the cohesion policy. This is a fact. I would like also to mention some points about the Italian debate, because I think that it's important to remember that when I was Minister of the Cohesion, I want to underline this point. In the Italian reform of cohesion, there wasn't any centralization. Why? Because, in fact, it was approved with the consensus of all regions and all cities. I don't know how to explain it, but with the cohesion money will not be possible to buy weapons. This is another important point that I want to underline today. We open the possibilities, I want to underline possibilities, to invest in the companies in defense, and we aim to have a double objective, giving these possibilities to member states, to the regions that want to invest in these sectors, always on the voluntary basis. But we also create territorial convergence, creating new jobs and raising the EU competitiveness. Let me be clear, cohesion policy is and will remain a fundamental component of the EU MFF. But it is also true that in the next MFF we cannot continue as we are doing now. We need to relaunch cohesion policy with ambition, but also with balance. It is, after all, emphasized in the treaties as a fundamental pillar of the Union's development and solidarity. Our duty now is to shape a strategic, modernized and streamlined policy, one that delivers impact where it is needed most. At the same time, I'm also committed to preserving the core principle of cohesion policy: partnership, shared agreement management, multi-level governance and a place-based approach. Both are possible. I will continue my dialogue with you in the Committee of the Regions and all stakeholders at all levels across Europe.